Welcome to the Still Life podcast, a series of 21 topics, with each episode exploring the practical nature of the spiritual experience. With time-tested insights from psychotherapy, evolutionary biology, and meditation, from ex-animator and stillness coach, Jim.
Because I view Jim George as a trainer for the soul. There's no better animation artist, drawer than Jim.
He is a friend, he is a mentor, incredible advisor. There's no one who's more important to me in my life.
The most interesting, most intelligent person I've ever met.
He truly is somebody who wants nothing from you and everything for you.
My name is Henry, and I'm a former client of Jim's, and the work we've done together over the past 8 years has changed my life. We're now on a mission to share these insights with you, and to draw some pretty interesting conclusions on how to live a still life. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Still Life podcast. So this week's episode I was really excited for prior to, because I kind of like putting Jim in uncomfortable positions where he has to talk to more polarizing and potentially thornier topics. And this week's episode is definitely one of them, because we're talking about spirit. Now, I think Jim does an even better than usual job at redefining the term so that we can really understand what it is that we're talking about here. And he does such a great job of subtly alluding to the traps that we've fallen into as a species, which may have led to the more polarizing nature of the term today. And I just think that that is unbelievably difficult to do in terms of having that level of clarity around a topic that is so broad, yet so individualized. And then not only that, but to articulate it so well in a way that it makes kind of the history of humankind make sense to a degree. And I think there's only one man for that job, and that's Jim George, and I think that that man has done an incredible job here. So please sit back and enjoy.
So, as always, Jim, can you start us off with, how do you define spirit?
I'd like to suggest that our minds, our human minds, our neurology, are analogous. That is, they love analogs. They love analogies. They're analog generators. And I'd like to suggest first, in case there's any lack of clarity, what an analogy is. It's a process by which we take information, qualities, characteristics of something that we're familiar with, something we know, and we map that information, those qualities, those characteristics, onto something we're not familiar with, that we don't know. Okay? This is a remarkable gift. In formal logic, it can be stated almost algebraically. A is to B as X is to Y. And for people who hate math, let's plug in some real information to those variables. If you know something about fish, but you don't know anything about birds, you can be taught something about birds without having any experience of birds. If someone were to say, because one of the things you understand about fish is they glide through water. Fish is to water what bird is to air. And something goes on in your mind. It's an abstraction. It's not happening out here in the real world. You don't have any more direct contact with birds, but you understand something more about birds. Now, it's a very incomplete knowledge, very imperfect, but it's an amazing gift if we pay attention to the potential shortcomings. We don't want to map information, qualities, and characteristics of something we do know, something we're familiar with, onto something we don't know and are unfamiliar with, information that isn't accurately representing that thing we don't know. That's a human failing that's gone on from the get-go. So we have to pay attention to that. But this is such a great way. It's an evolutionary strategy that's just brilliant. A beautiful way to know things we can't know directly, and a brilliant way to teach something to someone who hasn't had the experience. Analogy, okay? And the second thing, I'd like to suggest that our language, our words, have history. Some of our words go back hundreds, if not thousands of years. And if you think about that, it's a miracle. We're using the same words that some of our ancient forebears used thousands of years ago. Right now, we're using the same word. But that means those words have changed. They've grown, they've evolved, just as we as a species have changed. We've grown, we've evolved over time. Now that means some of these words have some real etymological baggage. Okay? And some of that baggage has some sharp, pointy edges that can trigger baggage, deep-seated baggage in us. Emotional baggage, ideological baggage, meaning baggage, identity baggage. See how important all these other podcasts are. They're helping us right now. Okay? I'd like to suggest that one such word is spirit. Spirit has been co-opted as a word. It's been used, it's been misused, it's been abused for so long that it means almost anything, everything, and nothing at all. But it's a very powerful and very important word. So define something that may well be infinite. Do you get the fool's journey that is? Okay? Define, make finite something that may not be finite. Okay? We want to explore that, but let's do the best we can. So I'd like to suggest that spirit tucks right up next to its early Latin roots. Spiritus. A Latin word that means, and wait for it, breath. Inspirare means to breathe in, literally. So there's something very important that a lot of very wise people for thousands of years knew about spirit. Let's respect that, even though we understand that they didn't have access to a lot of the data, the information. They didn't have Google. But let's respect them and say, okay, let's take this element of breath and put it over here. Let's not throw it away. So then over time, this word begins to take on a non-physical force or influence. Non-physical meaning we can't directly perceive it with our five senses. Okay? But it has a profound and measurable effect on the physical world. Okay? So it's a force, it's an influence, it's non-physical, but it has a measurable effect on the physical world. Okay? Then over time, it starts taking on this additional notion of an animating principle. then it takes on, over the years, additional meaning, the essence of something. The essence of something. Frequently, though not necessarily always, the non-physical essence of something. The irreducible nugget. As in the spirit of the law. Spirit of the law as opposed to the letter of the law. Old language, the letter of the law means what's written. The letters, the words. There's something beyond the letters and the words of that written law. The spirit of the law. It's non-physical, but somehow it's just assumed we can all apprehend it. Spirit of the law. Okay? So, it even went so far as to refer to something as traditionally non-spiritual as alcohol. And you walk, even today, into a high-end liquor store or a fancy restaurant, you flip over to the wine list, and there are wines, maybe beers and ales, and spirits. It's more of the essence, more alcohol per unit volume. So, we've got breath. We're going to put it over here and respect it. We've got a non-physical force or influence, not directly perceivable, but has a measurable, perceivable effect on the physical world. We add to that an animating principle, something that is bringing this ethereal idea of life to otherwise inanimate matter. Okay? Does that help to get at least some boundaries around what we're talking about?
Are you joking?
No. Does it just make a mess of it? So it's like, what are we even talking about?
Jim, that was the most helpful, interesting diatribe I think I've ever heard in my life. Like, I think there was more sort of quality per unit of whatever you just said to anything I've heard ever. So yeah, no, that's helpful.
Okay, good.
Okay, so I need to take a breath before I
Please,
get too excited.
You can't take too many of them.
You started off with talking about how our minds like to create analogies.
Yes.
We use things that are familiar to us and compare in order to try and understand something that we might not be able to.
Yes, and literally project. This is important. Project. We map onto this thing we don't know these same qualities, characteristics, information. It's an abstract process.
Brilliant. And you use the example of fish and birds,
Yes.
and understanding a fish swimming through water. I could then say to somebody, you don't know what air is, you don't know what birds are.
Yes.
But if you understand that air is less dense than water,
Yes.
then you can get another creature that can flow through this,
Yes.
and it's called a bird.
Yes.
Right?
It's brilliant.
And the mistake that you're cautioning against is to say, oh, because I understand the fish, now I understand the bird. Then you mentioned that if we look at the etymology, let's go down the history of just words in general.
Yeah.
The ones that have been around for the longest have had the longest time to morph and change and creep in meaning. There's more opportunity to potentially mismatch from the original intent.
Yeah.
And actually, when looking at a word like spirit, it originally came from, okay, this is Latin for breath and breathing.
Mm-hmm.
However, because of the qualities of breath and breathing, being like, okay, it's invisible,
Yes.
and it has some type of force behind it,
Yes.
but it's hard to see, understand, etc., we can then map that onto something that we don't understand. So it's using the analogy,
Yes.
and the word itself then goes under the pressure of time and
Yes.
changes and morphs.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, there were different qualities that we started to use of that same word when thinking about fermenting things with alcohol, for example.
Sure.
And basically distilling and getting more of the essence and the purity to something, then you have basically, if we think about a Venn diagram, there are all of these different qualities that are then being placed onto a word that actually had no intent to be what that was in the first place. It's actually very simply, this is just breath. But it was really quite, maybe it was a convenient mistake, or maybe there was some deeper intent behind it, because breath itself seems to be very much like a life force. And so being able to map the two together has created a word that, to go back to the start of the conversation, has many different connotations to different people. And you said, to sort of round off the incredible job that you did in sort of taking a couple of steps backwards and really getting the terrain and the play space incredibly well defined to then get to where we are. The position of what breath is what spirit is in today's day and age is incredibly prone to different interpretations and understandings because of the qualities that you described to start with.
And because of the inherent dangers of faulty analogies. And we'll talk about that. Okay?
Wow. Well, great way to kick us off, Jim.
Well, it's your topic. I want to thank you for this.
Okay, so I'm going to apologize, because I think that this can be a tricky question. So, how does this concept of spirit, as I think about my interpretation of this word, I think about other words that are close in the word map to spirit. And I think of terms such as soul, consciousness, energy. These are words that are all around that.
They are.
How does your concept of spirit differ from them? And how do you understand spirit personally?
I'm glad you framed it that way, because that's all this is. This is just my experience over running the course of a lifetime. I think of spirit in, ironically, practical terms. So I like to think of it as practical spirituality. So by practical, what do we mean? Praktikos in Greek, relating to or having to do with action. It's actionable. Okay? So practical, as opposed to esoteric spiritualism, practical spirituality. Okay? What would it need to be practical? Well, first it would have to be simple. And simple, not simplistic. Remember our definition of simple? The elimination of the unessential. Simplistic is, I've pulled too much away. It's no longer an accurate representative. So simple, the unessential is gone from it. Now we've got the essence. Okay, so it's got to be simple. It has to be useful in your daily life. It's not something you do on Sunday and then wander back to your life and the two never meet. This isn't religious, it's spiritual. Okay? It's not doctrinal, it's not dogmatic. It doesn't require your faith in it. You don't need to believe what I'm saying. It's testable. It's verifiable. And it is verifiable with the individual. You can test this daily. I do. And it has to be helpful. Not just useful, but helpful, individually and culturally. And I'd like to suggest that the essence of that helpful is it helps us reduce suffering. It helps us increase well-being. It helps us find our own unique life well lived. Uniquely. Each and every one of us, a little bit different. Okay? So, as simply as I can put it, practical spirituality is expanding the scope, the scale of your sense of self in all directions. An unending process of removing any self-imposed limits to who and what you truly are, who and what it truly is, and then reaping the immediate and long-term, the individual and the cultural benefits of that. And I assure you, those benefits are instantaneous, they're verifiable, you can feel them, you can see them in the world. I'm the luckiest guy on earth because those benefits are all around me now. All around me, wherever I go. So, practical spirituality. We're not talking some woo-woo thing. Okay? Does that help?
Yes, sir.
So, I'd like to suggest that at the scope of human endeavor, at the scale of most human endeavor, which is where we're practically operating, but just to be clear, I'd like to suggest the scope, the scale of human beings and their immediate environment, and I'm going all the way out to planetary motion and all the way down to the molecular level, is such a tiny sliver of what is that compared to the rest of the universe, what's going on, it rounds to zero. But it's very important to us, so that's what we're going to talk about, that scale. And I'd like to suggest, at that particular scale, the non-physical is an entirely different domain from the physical. Okay? Entirely different domain. That makes it challenging to use the same process or processes to apprehend the non-physical that we use to apprehend the physical. That makes sense?
Yes, sir.
It's a little like chemically analyzing a painting. Okay? A little bit like licking a piece of music. I promise you, if you chemically analyze a painting, you're going to get a lot of information. And that information might all be accurate, but I highly doubt you're going to get the essence, the spirit of that painting. You try and lick a piece of music, you're going to get information, I promise. It may be accurate. I doubt if you're going to get the spirit of that piece of music, because the spirit of that painting, the essence of that piece of music is non-physical. But it has a profound effect on the physical universe, including how you feel when you get to apprehend both of those. Okay? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So, I'd like to suggest that if we, individually or as a culture, focus all of our attention, if we assume that the only thing that's real is the physical, I mean really real, that which we can see, hear, taste, touch, feel, then what's going to happen, and I'm saying exclusively on the physical, right? Then we subtly but inexorably shift the focus of our attention to the physical and only the physical. We're shifting the focus of our awareness to only the physical. And over time, then we begin to look for our answers. We look for our meaning. We look for our truth in only the material world. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to find answers or meaning or truth in the material world. You are. But what I'm suggesting is, if you exclude everything but the physical world, then I don't know if you're going to actually find what you're looking for. And our science classically, not so much today, but classically, did just that. And I'd suggest that we, like them, are like the guy who's lost his keys in a dark alley, but he's out on his knees on the sidewalk looking for his keys under the street lamp because the light's better out there. It is highly unlikely that either of us are going to find what we're looking for, the essential meaning, the essential truth. Okay? Let me ask you a question. Is the earth flat or pie-shaped? And why is that funny?
Because you've reduced my choice, so I can't give you the answer that I feel correct.
If I limit the contextual frame, the conceptual frame, then I have limited your capacity to know before we ever begin. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to stop you now, though.
Good.
Because otherwise I'm going to go into overload and we aren't going to have a conversation.
Okay.
We're just going to have to go back and repeat conversation.
No. That's why I'm here. You're helping me not do that.
Well, Jim, I firstly just have to say that both your mind and, I don't know if I can say this, but I think you know the sentiment, both your mind and your spirit are incredible.
Oh, bless your heart.
This already is just like, I cannot wait for the next few weeks to go by and just have these glunk moments and these sort of epiphanies within myself.
Oh, good.
And I know that this is just, it's inspirational.
Oh, good.
So let's take a step back for a second.
Good.
And go back to where you were talking about practical spirituality.
Yes.
So with practical spirituality, you touched on another one of our previous topics, which is focus.
Yes.
In terms of expanding the scope of context. But in this case, it's expanding the sense of self.
Yes.
And then you see that as practical, as actionable, if it's simple, testable, and helps everything and everyone around you.
Yes.
And so what I was getting from that was, when you were talking about this, we've expanded our sense of self with these breaths a couple of times.
Yes.
And not in some type of woo-woo way.
Right.
Literally, I could feel the contraction in my gut release and muscular expansion as we were doing that.
Yes.
And it's a very grounding sensation.
Yes.
As I said, it's causing me to not be so excited, which is anxious and constricted.
Brilliant.
So this is practical.
Yeah.
And what it's also doing, I'm trying to make this as is easy to connect with as possible. Mm-hmm. What it's also doing is, all we're doing is expanding not even just sense of self, but actual physical self.
Yes.
And through that, it isn't constricting the flow of energy within me. So I can better understand and comprehend what it is that you are pitching here.
Yes. Yeah.
And so with all of that, it's very simple, it's very testable and actionable, but I'm expanding my sense of self and acting spiritually to a degree, inspiring and expiring.
Yes.
And with that, my sense of self expands, right?
Yeah.
And the scope expands. That was a big point.
Which you utterly nailed. Nothing's going over your head.
Good. Well,
you're nailing this. No, this is beautiful.
Okay, good.
I'm a geezer. I've been working with this stuff a long time. You just nailed that.
Good. And then so what I found really interesting with what you were saying afterwards is that there's a tendency to only want to look in the physical realm, in the measurable realm, and this goes back to our last conversation with control.
Yes.
Because there you have something that's easy to measure, easy to control,
Yes.
well, easier to measure and easier to control.
Yes.
And then you can also find safety within that.
Exactly.
Because-
it's what we call tangible.
Yeah.
I can hold it.
Yeah.
Tenere, to hold. I can hold it. As opposed to, it's floating away.
Mm. And it's also, you can fall into traps with that because taken in too far in one direction, if you only focus on the numbers, if you only focus on what's tangible, if you
Yes.
only, you lose the essence of something.
Brilliant.
Right? Example here, Robert McNamara in the Vietnam War, only counting death count as the measure of success.
Yes.
And not taking into account things like the sentiment of the Vietnamese people
Yes.
and the overall morale of the American troops.
Yeah.
And so you have something that's controllable and something that's absolutely measurable and tangible, and hyper fixating on that, you lose the essence of what's actually going on in that war, and it can take you in the complete wrong direction because you're thinking one thing and you're hiding in something controllable.
Yes.
And you miss a bigger part of what's going on.
Perfect analogy. That's great.
Yeah. Okay. This is great. I feel like I'm
You're nailing it.
Okay. And then so what you then talked about was licking music,
Yeah.
which I just thought was a brilliant, brilliant thing to think about. And also chemically reducing a painting, because we can do that, and because we're gaining accurate information, we can get lost in like, oh, this is what this thing is.
Yes.
Whereas actually we're missing, no pun intended, the bigger picture.
Yes.
Or the real spirit, the essence to what is going on and
Yes.
what is there.
Yes.
Okay. Did I overlook anything?
No. You've nailed it. Clarified it. You've simplified it. It's great.
I wouldn't say I've simplified it. I think I just get this irking feeling that you have a pretty damn good way of giving an accurate representation of things with your wording, and I think I've probably cut some corners.
But you've
happy we're on the same page.
You've got the essence of it. That's what matters.
To go back to the third point of your first spiel, we're talking about this life force, this animating something. Does that run through everybody and everything? Is there some universal fabric or consciousness or spirit that runs through us all that actually connects and unifies us?
So, in order to even answer that question, and forgive me for this, but I have to then get enough data laid out so that it will become self-evident what the answer to that question is. Okay? Forgive me. Feel free to cut me off if it goes too long. I'd like to suggest that our universe is what I call holotropic. We've talked about this before. Holos, Greek, whole, complete, unified, and balanced. I like to suggest that the study of ecology is just the study of that balance. That's all that is. And we, as holotropic aspects of that universe, will ultimately incline back to, because that's what the tropic part means, inclining toward or turning toward wholeness, completeness, and balance. That we, human beings, keep wandering off to one extreme or the other. We go too far off into the physical domain, and that universe will bring us back. Just give us enough time, give us enough space, and we will. And I'd like to suggest that's exactly what our science has done. Our classic science focused purely on the physical, that realm, that domain. Okay? All the way out to planetary movements, all the way down to molecular levels. Our modern science, however, because God loved them, they are sincere and they are rigorous. Everything has to be peer-reviewed. Everything has to be verifiable with the scientific principle, which includes empiric data and predictability. In this pursuit of only the physical, they went farther and farther into this physical world, only to discover that the farther in they got, the more eerily, spookily, non-physical it started to become. And even that's a misnomer. It didn't become that. It always was that. And I'd like to suggest that some of the people who decided not to go into the physical exclusively, but who went inward to the non-physical, figured that out thousands of years ago. But their language was unscientific. It's an illusion. The physical world is an illusion. It's this weird dance, this bizarre dance. Okay? And the only problem with that is the people who went in far enough to experience that directly found themselves in the position of being a fully modern adult in a world of 5-year-old children who had none of that experience. So what did they do? Create analogies. Imperfect, incomplete ways of teaching. And those analogies, and I'm not just talking about people like the Buddhists, I'm talking about anybody. This is available to anybody. They took qualities, characteristics, information about something that everyone is familiar, themselves, human beings. And they projected that, they mapped that onto this, let's call it, spiritual experience. The problem is we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater by saying spirit is woo-woo, now the hell with it. Just because somebody made a faulty analogy. That makes sense?
Yes, sir.
So, as this exploration by our rigorous scientists took on a more modern direction, starting with what I'm just going to arbitrarily put a point in time. You can't say this is where it happened, but early 1800s, 1820 something, I think 1821, Michael Faraday, a brilliant English physicist, okay, is assigned a task by the mucky-mucks in the Royal Academy, specifically a guy named Sir Humphrey Davy, who was a big mucky-muck in the Royal Academy. He had been Oxford trained, right? Cambridge trained. He's one of these guys that has the orthodoxy down. And anybody who had been trained in scientific orthodoxy, that is, what we're saying is it, period, and so we believe it, energy moves in these very, very discrete lines of force. Obviously, it's obvious. And this guy, Michael Faraday, who wasn't classically trained, Oxford or Cambridge, but he had a background that was highly spiritual. And we're just going to leave that term now, okay? So he gets assigned as this guy Humphrey Davy's apprentice. You know, there's this thing that we've pretty well got figured out, but there's some I's to dot and T's to cross. This thing called magnetism, which we got to figure it out. And also electricity. Got it all worked out. We've figured out how to put it in batteries, and we can work with it. So fiddle around with it while we do some important work. Fiddle around with this stuff. So Michael Faraday, grateful for the opportunity, goes in there, but he brings with him a spiritual concept, spiritual geometry, not straight logical lines that are abstractions, but circular motion, spherical motion. He begins to envision magnetism as a field for the first time, a non-physical field of influence that can be measured indirectly by its effect on the physical world. He proposes this to Davy and a bunch of people, and Davy thought that was hilarious. I mean, they were just laughing. It's crazy. Until Michael Faraday, who said, I'm not talking about dogma or doctrine here, or orthodoxy. I'm talking about testing this. So he takes a big, thick piece of paper and sprinkles very fine iron filings all over it, takes a powerful magnet, puts it underneath, and boom, those iron filings describe this field perfectly. The field that is itself non-physical, imperceptible to our senses, but verifiable. He brought scientific validation to the party. Now people weren't laughing. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall at that particular meeting, because that scientific meeting was probably indistinguishable from a seance. It's like, what's that? But he didn't stop there. He just kept going. And he went to the electrical part, the electricity part, and said, yeah, fields. Not this mechanistic thing we've been doing, fields of influence. And he described this electrical field and went so far as to say it is literally, inexorably interwoven with this magnetic field. He called it an electromagnetic field, integrated the whole shooting match, and they kind of chuckled but didn't laugh out loud. And he said, well, yeah, but we've got to verify this. So he runs current through a coil of copper wire, creates this field. But how do we know? You can't see it. He brings a compass into the room, which measures north. It measures north. It's kind of related to magnetism, but who knows how. And he shows that when you bring this compass next to that coil with electricity running through it, it is electromagnetic, that same field. Holy crap. Does that mean there's a field around the earth? Yep. And we can test it. And they did. Now, any freshman physics student has heard of Michael Faraday, but they've never heard of Humphrey Davy. Because Michael Faraday was the real deal. I'm suggesting he was practically spiritual. And what he was describing was as close as hardcore physics, the mother of all our physical sciences, the study of what's real, the physical. Okay? He introduced this idea of fields, and now fields are everywhere. Gravity, which had been described 100 years earlier by our friend with the apple, Isaac Newton, not as a field, but as a force. Now we're thinking of it in terms of fields, imperceptible, non-physical fields that exist throughout the universe. They're imperceptible by our senses, directly, but indirectly, they have a profound effect on the physical world. In the case of the gravitational field, it has a profound effect on any physical matter that has mass, from particles to planets. We have the electromagnetic field, which also exists everywhere throughout the universe. That's how light's coming down to the earth. Light's not traveling through air or water or even through particles. Frequently, it's moving through space with no matter in it. What's waving? It's the electromagnetic field. Compressions of which are the little packets of that field are photons. They're light. That's how we see. It's everywhere in the universe. But physics went even farther. This is why I love these guys. Okay? Went even further and said there is this thing called the quantum field. Quantum field. Deep, primary, essential field. Perturbations of which, agitation of which, okay, are the packets of energy we think of as particles. It gives rise to, it animates particles, fundamental unit of everything in our physical world. Looked at it a different way, these compressions, spherical compressions, and then rarefactions of that field, waves. At certain frequencies, at certain amplitudes, this thing that is non-physical can't even be called a thing, imperceivable by our senses directly, but has a profound effect on the physical world, a measurable effect. It is self-evident that it's real if you go down there far enough. And I'm saying you get still enough and you will sense that field. And by the way, whatever you call that field isn't what the field is. So don't get snookered by, well, it's not the quantum field if it's string theory. Okay, string theory is defining the same thing with words, with analogs, analogies. So not to beat a dead horse, but fields are to science what spirit is to philosophy and religion. So let's explore this thing we call practical spirituality. See, practical spirituality is about as practical as spirituality can get. It's simply living your life as fully and completely as you can. And through the practice of stillness, expanding the scope of your sense of self. A never-ending process of going beyond any self-imposed limitations on who and what you truly are, at the deepest, most fundamental level. See, I'd like to suggest that in stillness, the sense of self softens. It softens. And it begins to expand more and more. And even more. And this process goes on forever. And if that seems like more than you can imagine right now, if it seems like more than you can conceive of, well, that's okay. That's as it should be. This isn't a concept in your mind. And neither are you. You are so much more than that. So just breathe now, slowly, deeply. That's it. Be still and know. You're just beginning to remember who and what you truly are. There's no rush.
Do you believe that there's something that unifies and animates everything?
Yes,
Got a resounding yes from that.
because it doesn't unify, it is everything. This is the key to practical spirituality. This isn't some woo-woo thing flowing through me, a separate, isolated thing. It is me. It is you. It is this table. It is the air we breathe. And if I can expand the scope, the scale of my sense of self, and when I do that, I realize, wow, even that's a misnomer. All I'm doing is removing self-imposed limits on that infinite self that's always been there. I'm not doing anything but getting out of the way. That makes sense? That is available to anyone. You don't have to go through the first church of the gooey death and discount house to get there. No, I'm serious. It's available to anyone. Just get quiet enough and it will become self-evident.
So let's take a couple of steps backwards.
Good.
Back to where you started this. The universe is holotropic.
Yes.
So it's moving towards wholeness.
Mhm.
It's moving towards a state of balance.
Mhm.
If we look at history, the scientific revolution really came with a change of scope, with the telescope and
Yes.
with the microscope.
Yes.
And we realized that in both extremes, things are not what they seem to be.
Yes.
And so when understanding that, the pendulum is very much in one direction with religious orthodoxy back in the 1700s that are really going into pretty awful directions with,
Yes.
witch hunts and
Sure.
crusades, etc., etc.
Sure.
So this pendulum then starts to return to, probably go through balance because we strike upon these tools and then all of a sudden we can measure things and we get really sort of excited by this, that there then tends to be a divide in camps of thinking where it's like, okay, if you're talking about something that can't be measured, and when anthropomorphizing things, it's like, well, I don't know if there's so many inconsistencies with your God being an angry human, but then also being benevolent and an omnipotent. It's like, that's a contradiction. And when getting caught up in the words rather than the experience, it's easy to deflate the whole thing and say, actually, I'm going to go in the more controllable, practical, scientific direction.
Right.
So then you get to the point where you're talking about Michael Faraday in the early 1800s, who had another great analogous analogy, talking about fields.
Yes.
Well, it's really not the thing outside that the cows are munching on, but it's from let's use this as a useful construction, actually showed that magnetism and electricity are interlinked. They're two sides of the same coin. This is electromagnetism in a nutshell. And that broke a lot of the conception of what the modern day scientist believed at that time. And a lot of that could have come from Michael Faraday's ability to get quiet and expand and drop into these other states and observe, to then map on that this is how the world could be working. Another man who did a very similar analogous thing was Albert Einstein, when again, he would drop into these states a lot, and this is reported, and he made the same sort of connection of two sides of the same coin, but instead of electricity and magnetism, use space and time. And that's space-time being the fabric of the universe.
And energy and matter, mass. And you see the wholeness, because these people aren't just doing, forgive me, Albert, thought experiments. They're calling them that. Something much deeper is happening. And someone who is going to look for meaning, answers, and truth in only the physical domain is going to continue to chop up brain tissue looking for that. And they will never find it. They'll get farther and farther down until it makes that beep and pops, just like energy will pop into matter, matter will pop into energy. But you're nailing this, Henry. You're nailing it. That's why I love you. You can get this.
Well, it's only because I'm stood on the shoulders of giants. And
Well, we all are.
yeah. Well, actually, that goes right back to, I think that was stealing from Isaac Newton. So it's like, yeah, thanks for making me sound clever too, Newton.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Where to now? I feel like we've just covered so much.
Well, what's important to remember is we want to begin to understand that if we will quiet our minds, if we will relax our bodies, if we will calm our emotions, more and more and more of this will become apparent. Now notice I didn't say more of this will flow through us, because it is us. You get the difference? Part of the problem with spiritual talk is it's this other thing that comes up inside and woo. It's who we are. It's what we are. And I'm suggesting that at that essential level, I'm not talking about trying to take quantum mechanics and make it work at this level, this scope of context of human endeavor. What I'm suggesting is, if you get quiet enough, you'll begin to realize that there is a very deep and very causal kind of relationship between all of these domains. They're interconnected. That's what wholeness is. The question is, at what point does it no longer serve you to think, I am everything? Good. Then come on back to whatever domain you choose to play in, but play better, because you have this deeper understanding. This isn't about giving up whatever you want. It's about having a better experience of what you want, because you've got some real context here. I'd like to suggest there are more undiscovered fields than there are any fields out there now. These fields exist. They're invisible, and therefore they don't exist until Kevin figures, wow, maybe it's there, and discovers it. It's just getting quieter and quieter, going deeper and deeper, and understanding these fields. And they start to get very fuzzy. The quantum field has many characteristics traditionally associated with spirituality. It's just that you don't want to say it's the same thing, because you're just going to trigger all kinds of stuff, including lack of scientific rigor. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is a quantum field is non-local. It's here and infinitely far away. I'm saying that I'm just pulling stuff out of the air. The principle of quantum entanglement, which people talk about, who talk about this stuff, the fact that a particle can interact with another particle instantly over enormous distances. what they call spooky action at a distance, is something that stumped even Einstein. It's part of what made him fall out of favor with more modern physics, because he's thinking, well, there's a speed limit. I mean, you can't travel from here to there because the fastest you can go is the speed of light. That's why they used it in that equation. It represents the upper boundary of speed, celeritas. I'm suggesting there's no traveling to be done. You don't go from here to there. If I'm exhibiting telepathic qualities and labeling telepathic, I'm kind of mislabeling. If I expand my awareness to the point, and I mean really, get rid of the limits that keep me from being able to do this, because I already am this. Your thoughts are my thoughts. I'm not traveling. There's no tele to the pathic. Your thoughts are my thoughts. But as a human being, I'm not sure I want that.
You definitely don't want my thoughts, Jim.
No, but what I'm saying is it then becomes self-evident we couldn't have the experience we're having if we throw the experience of perceiving ourselves to be limited, separate human beings. We go to all the trouble of forgetting who we really are so we can even have this experience, and then we spend the rest of our lives trying not to have the experience. I want to go to the last page in the book. I want to know how it ends. Part of being human is you don't know. And I'm suggesting the gods envy us for not knowing. It's why they've created this. And I'm just saying they in a hilariously, misaligned linguistic turn of phrase. The beauty of this is in order to have a finite human experience, you have to forget what really is. And I'm just suggesting that's what we've done.
Okay, so let's take this back to stillness, because if I'm quieting my mind and I'm expanding, and again, stillness is a word, it's a representation of a state of mind and being.
Yes. So is expanding. Because the reality is all we're doing is eliminating the false self-imposed limits on what already is. Completely expanded, unified, whole and complete awareness.
Yeah.
Good.
So if we're going to make this practical, right? Georg Forgenstein has a really cool definition of what spirituality means to him,
Good.
which is just taking responsibility for truths that you understand about yourself. And so if I use my personal experience here, in stillness, in expansion, I have an ability to observe the separate, finite being that is Henry Mitchell. And in that observation can really understand uncomfortable truths about myself.
Yes.
And then take responsibility for those truths.
Yes.
Now, to me, that is very actionable. And that's a very spiritual thing to do, because it's in a state of expansion, realizing actually, that's hypocritical, Henry, or that you're holding resentment for something here when actually you aren't taking responsibility for what could be really going on.
Yes.
And so the human vessel that this life force is animating can then, it has some sort of presets to it, and some of it is, we won't go deep back into identity and personality and all of that, but I can then observe these truths within myself and come back into this state. And I say come back in because I'm not coming back in. It's all there. It's all whatever.
Yeah.
But this gives an ability to then act upon and start to really, what's funny is that it becomes sort of reflexive to be more to act more morally, but
Isn't that interesting? Because there's no moral imposition on you. It's coming from within. And ironically, this is all the Tao Te Ching is. It's literally all. That's what I mean. This isn't about me. Lao Tzu's saying the same thing. Morality will just create more problems. Don't try to impose this on people. Help them to discover it within themselves.
Okay, this is what I love, because you're connecting dots that telepathically, it's like you're in my head. It's like, Jim, you're getting all these things already.
Yeah.
Rumi also has a great quotation where we're taught that God sees us from above, where really he sees us from within.
Yes.
And again, there's a conception of he, but like, and let's not get into God. We're already doing a bunch of stuff with spirit. We don't want to take it too far.
It's dog spelled backwards.
Yeah.
That's good.
But what I'm getting to here is that you've got this ability through practice to quiet down the mind, observe the mind, take responsibility for truths that you understand about that mind.
Yes.
And there's reflexive things that come with that in terms of acting more morally and acting more in accordance with wholeness.
Yes.
In accordance with the larger collective of people. And then if you really take a page out of Buddhism, it's all living things and creatures and sentient beings.
Yes.
And so with that being said, this is a really long-winded way of getting to a question, Henry.
No, it's good.
Here I am observing myself, I guess. But with all that being said, it feels to me as if each of these different religions were having similar experiences and then creating doctrines and dogmas around those experiences
Brilliant.
to help people get to having them themselves. And there is a way to tap into this that isn't necessarily religious as such,
Yes.
but is essential to having a different type of human experience.
Yes.
And one that might be classified as spiritual as such.
Yeah.
So the question that I want to get to here is that stillness is a practice. And a lot of these religious frameworks talk about like purifying the spirit and doing all of these things, like don't drink alcohol.
Sure.
And like you can go to Zen Buddhism and there's the 9 things that mind boxes you got to check, etc., etc.
Sure.
It seems that a lot of these are self-evident when you just practice the quietness of mind over a long period of time.
Over a long period of time.
I just want to say this because like when I first started getting still, I was not necessarily acting in accordance, whatever.
Sure.
But this is over years, it just sort of blossoms within itself.
Yeah.
So is that nurturing spirits? Is that strengthening spirits? Can you purify and corrupt spirits? You know, I'm just throwing basically a bunch of words on what an experience is, just so that we can get really clear on what it is that we're talking about with being spiritual and stillness in general.
Good. So remember this intrinsic tendency we humans have, because we know more about our personal experience than we know about anything else, to place ourselves at the center of the universe and project our qualities, our characteristics onto everyone and everything else. Again, called anthropomorphizing. Anthropos, man, right? Projecting. So we're talking about purifying spirit. I'm suggesting that if you and I just got quiet, I mean deeply still, not just dropping like we have been, but got deeply still, as you were asking that question, you and then I would crack up. We'd start laughing. Because what is it that needs purifying? Spirit or you? You're purifying, in quotes, the medium. And when you get down far enough, you realize, oh my God, it's not some thing flowing through me. It's what I am. It is my self-limitations that are prohibiting me from perceiving that directly right now. And this process of, as we call it, expanding your sense of self is infinite. Infinite, unending. That's what a spiritual practice is. It's going beyond where you are now, in all directions. Tomorrow afternoon at 4, I'm going beyond where I am, but that may be beyond where I am now. 20 years from now, I will have gone beyond where I am now, but my spiritual practice is to go beyond where I am then, now. Eternally in all directions. I'm suggesting that even though that may sound a little loosey-goosey, it's very practical. Practicos, action, actionable, practice, action. Do it, don't think about it. Do it more and more. Don't think about it. Thoughts about something aren't the thing. We've been trained most of our lives to build a constructed mental world that represents what's out here, what we can't control. We then move into that constructed world of symbols, thoughts, emotions, feelings, blah, 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 blah. And we can control that to a degree so we feel better. That's not what's real. That's abstraction. We got snookered. Whoop. Okay? When you get still enough, you're watching that process. That's the whole point of Vipassana meditation. Just shut the F up and watch. Just watch your mind. And by watch, I mean perceive, not look at. That's another one of these sensory, solipsisms. And then you get into, okay, what is perception? What is awareness? What they call the hard question, the hard problem of philosophy. We'll get into this. You think you know what perception is because you're looking through eyes? There's stuff right there in the physical world that doesn't even map on to what it is to look at something. Bees see in ultraviolet. They're not seeing in ultraviolet, they're sensing something that we can't. That's just right here on planet Earth. How much awareness do you think there is? And where do you think it's localized? Because we can't conceive of something beyond it's in a package with an address that says me, me, me written on it. What I'm suggesting is this infinite and endless expansion of your sense of self will inevitably lead you, wait for it, to wholeness, completeness. It's what you already are. It's why the analogy of I'm going on a quest, I'm going on a journey, and I wind up coming back. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. How many thousands, tens of thousands of stories are basically that?
So you mentioned that if we get down far enough, but that this is ultimately infinite, and we continue to practice and continue to expand and expand and expand.
Yeah.
Is there such thing as enlightenment then? And is this another word that's sort of throwing us off a little bit because it implies that there's this binary switch where you're unenlightened and then you're enlightened?
Good for you.
If we're talking about this like infinite process of continual expansion, is there such thing as enlightenment, and how does a practice sort of interweave with that?
So again, not to be cute here, but I mean this, and I'm trying to get as close to the reality as possible. I'd like you to think of enlightenment as the cessation of endarkenment, stop in darkening what's there. There's no point at which you're suddenly what you are. I'm just suggesting that we have self-imposed limits. And when I say self, I mean a deeper self that may know more than you might give it credit for, including the utter joy that happens in just waking up after having put yourself to sleep. In a weird way, it's like hitting yourself in the head with a hammer because it feels so good to stop. Kind of what we're doing. And what I'm suggesting is this practical spirituality has profound and far-reaching implications in our world. It is not condemning in any way or rejecting any religious practice. It's just totally wide open to it, to the degree that that is a spiritual practice and not the remnants of some one person having an experience of waking up and seeing what's going on, describing it to people around that person, and he or she only has access to this analogy process. Because now you're surrounded with people who haven't had it, and you're describing it in a way that isn't complete, because you can't describe it. You have to have it. And so all of these people who then follow, who are taking that analogy literally, because that's all they've got, we can begin to have more compassion for that, because our sense of self expands. I understand what it's like to be in that position. I don't know, but they told me this. And then a lot of those people who are afraid, we've talked about control. We need to be able to control people. Well, now we can be the gateway between you and what's your birthright. Direct connection to this wholeness. Again, you get quiet enough, that idea is hilarious. But if you're not quiet enough, it's worth fighting religious wars over. And now more than ever, we've got to get some practical spirituality going on. The impact immediately, your sense of self expands. Your sense of self expands to the point where it includes me. Are you going to harm me? Because I'm not going to harm you. Knowingly, I'm not going to harm you. I don't care what happens. I can't. You are me. And it continues to expand infinitely because it's a practice. It's a spiritual practice. I'm not doing it because I'm going to win brownie points in heaven someday. I'm doing it because it's the only thing to do. I have no choice. That's why we're doing what we're doing. I have seen the effect of this in endless manifestations in people, going off and just doing remarkably beautiful, helpful things. And then the humanity comes back, the limits come back. Sometimes they get back caught up. That's okay. Part of this practical spirituality is do the best that you can right now, knowing that you're expanding. Try not to do too much harm, but don't beat yourself up if it turns out that it seemed like a good idea at the time, but it wasn't. One of the first things that comes of this practical spirituality, compassion, loving compassion. Not because I've been taught to be compassionate. I'm just filled with it because it's what I am. It's what you are. It's only fear standing between you and being the most loving creature on earth anytime. And this present moment may be that moment. So it also teaches you patience. The next split second may be the big moment. I don't know. It also helps you not to worry. Because what if? Well, what if doesn't have to be some binary exploration of the worst possible scenarios. It can be the best possible scenarios. What if this next moment we both just open our eyes, metaphorically speaking, and just suddenly have an inexplicable, that is, we can't explain what just happened. We feel so fulfilled, so complete, so grateful that we're just sitting here staring at one another in that state. Because a whole, complete universe inclined us toward that. And I want to thank you for that. Because that was a real gift. Did you feel it?
I used to say it's the Queen English, but
But she's dead. So, yeah.
yeah, I really do feel that. And it's amazing how quickly that expansion can occur through practice.
Yes.
And as we spoke about earlier with the start of this conversation, now just using 1 or 2 breaths has anchored a much deeper state of expansion.
Yes.
So much so that I used to have a false conception, because it was a helpful way to think about splitting up my day.
Yeah.
But it's like I'll reserve 10 minutes a day for stillness.
Yeah.
And this is when I am still, with the implication that for the rest of my day I'm not, right?
Good for you.
And what became so great is that as that 10 minutes started to extend, it also started to blend throughout my day.
Yeah.
And then the whole sort of spiritual practice became anytime you remember.
Yes.
It's like, oh, cool.
Yes. Boom.
Find it.
Yes.
All throughout the day.
Yeah.
And that repetition has made me fundamentally a better person.
Yeah.
Because these emotions that can sneak in and really absorb and inflate my whole state of awareness, I've got more sort of understanding of the hallmarks of them, because I can step back and observe and then come back in through this expansion.
Yes.
But also sort of pull out a lot of the supports for them as they start to get constructed. So it's like, oh, here we have a state of righteous indignation. You know that whenever you make decisions out of this state, Henry, shit goes wrong.
Yeah.
Let's start pulling this away.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily, this is something that I want to be very clear about, that's not in opposition to my nature.
No.
That's not in opposition to who and what I am.
It is deeper
Exactly.
aspect of your true nature.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. And that's something that, again, was a misconception for me when starting the spiritual journey.
Yeah.
Is I thought, like, is this going to turn me into somebody that I'm not? Is this going to make me somebody that, and well, what it's helped me to do is actually to refine habits that were, and completely shift other ones, that were steering me in a direction that I didn't think my future self wanted to go.
Yeah.
But what's been so fascinating is that it's expressed character traits within me that were either dormant or not as noticeable as I was used to. Yeah. It really starts to they start to sort of manifest in ways that I would never have expected. Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing about this spiritual journey as such, because the more that you do it, the more that feels like, oh, this should be. And I tend to conflate this should be with this is guided and this has happened and this is.
Yeah.
And I actually am only saying that in that way so that I don't turn people off. But actually, my conception of time is it's already bloody happened.
Yeah.
It is already guided.
That's right.
Whatever this whole field is,
Right.
it's like I'm perceiving time in a very linear way when it's not.
Yes.
We're getting into really
Careful.
hot territory.
Yeah. Because we'll talk
I'm
about
gonna,
all of it.
I'm gonna reel this back a little bit
Sure.
just before we really dive off somewhere that we don't need to. But I guess what I'm trying to get to is that the conception of a spiritual journey is amplified through a practice.
Yes.
That practice helps you to observe yourself, observe these truths within yourself, and then
Yes.
to act responsibly for them.
Yeah.
And that tends to benefit the whole.
It does.
And not just the whole in terms of the tribe, not just the whole in terms of the country, not just the whole in terms of the human populace, but just sort of everything
Yes.
around,
Yes.
as you feel as if you can sort of integrate yourself more elegantly and do the best that you can at that time, at that stage,
Yeah.
with that level of awareness that you
Yes.
have. To me, that is such a worthy pursuit that it is turned into something that I get a lot of resistance for in terms of from my immediate peer group and family, where,
Say more about that. What kind of resistance?
well, there's,
Seems like that's a pretty beneficial thing.
I think so.
Okay.
And that's what my spirit is telling me.
Okay.
That's what is,
But what kind of feedback are you getting?
that it has led to an intensity and the speed at which my habits have changed have meant that certain people feel as if they're losing me
Okay.
as such, and that can be hurtful internally to hear that.
Okay.
But I think that ultimately, when I look at my identity and where I derive meaning,
Good for
the
you.
bigger piece of just this universal awareness that I tap into and have
Yeah.
readily accessed
Yeah.
multiple times a day now, which is unbelievable. It's like that feeling, it fuels my spirit as such.
Yeah.
And there's this wisdom that comes to me. It's not my fucking thoughts.
Right.
It's like literally self-apparent, where it's like,
Yes.
you've been given this gift. You have been dealt this hand. Take it as far as you can. Like, don't leave anything on the table.
Sure.
You know, don't do it. Don't try and show your best self. Be your best self. Like, actually be your best self. Fuck the outside in. It's all inside out. And do it for me. Do it because you can, not because anybody else is telling you to do it, type thing.
Right.
And so that's this internal sensation that I feel. And then you know this about me because we've done so much work together. It's like approval and acceptance and recognition from the people that I love the most is incredibly important to me.
Will you do me a favor? Just change the tense of that verb.
Was incredibly important.
Yes, it certainly was. And that limited part of you that thought that's who you are, that was a life and death factor. Okay? People got to know that limited aspect of who you are and want predictability because they are not seeing this infinite, wildly expansive true self. They're seeing it as an element in their self-referential world. That's okay. We can be compassionate. We can understand that. But I'm suggesting that the people who are saying, this is very interesting, Henry, show me more of who you really are. Well, they're interested in who you are, not this persona. So just be aware of the fact that everything in this universe is changing, including the people who are trying to get you not to change. It's just that their changing is okay, your changing isn't, from the frame of reference of their solipsistic view. I'm not even saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm saying just see it for what it is. And I think you'll begin to discover that the intensity that they're worried about may be part of a momentum that's carrying you to a level that doesn't need to be there. I mean, you know how important this stuff is to me, but if I'm up in your grill, I'm going to make you uncomfortable. I need to expand my sense of self even more. And you get rid of that piece. Because I'm not selling anything anymore. But I'm a geezer. When I was younger, it was all about selling. It was all about you agree with me or you're against me. You know, it's one of these two things. You're with me or against. No, it's not. It's not. I'm watching you over time, with the patience of a geezer, by the way, expand just geometrically. Your path has done this. Be patient with them. Be patient with yourself. Know that both of you are doing the best that you can. And discomfort isn't a bad thing. Discomfort usually points to where we can do some work. Start to embrace that. They're uncomfortable with something that you're doing. You're uncomfortable with something they're doing. Wow, who is it that needs their approval as opposed to just feels love for them? Is that who you really are?
Well, this is what I come to, is that I feel this constriction and I feel my state getting rocked and I feel these emotions and I go and I sit down and I quiet my mind and I connect with something so beautiful and so benevolent and so loving. And it just becomes self-evident. It's like, how could I turn my back on that? I have an opportunity here with in my opinion, the world's most articulate man. And there's an opportunity to share access to this message by removing barriers that could just be linguistic.
Sure.
You know, here's a fucking word, spirit.
Good
what
for
does that
you.
mean? It's
Good
like,
for
well,
you.
let's talk about it. So someone might have the opportunity to actually explore this to a depth. It's like, to me, that is, this world is communicating with us. That is very evident to me, and it's using every single metric and measurable thing to tell us that this world is fucked the way that we're living it. And here is a way to expand sense of self and really absolve human fear. Like, that to me is the coolest opportunity in the world. It's like, how do we get this to be able to talk and share this? It's like, this isn't pens, this isn't trinkets, this isn't bullshit. It's fucking real.
Luckiest two guys on earth.
Luckiest two guys on earth. It's like,
as a vehicle for this holotropic phenomenon that is. That's all. It's not like you know something and they don't. That's part of that egoic death trap. Don't even go there. We're interacting, but this interaction is coming back to something better. Better, 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 infinitely. That's why I'm here. That's why you're here. And I just love you for that, because you're able to see, even in the midst of an old habit, it's just an egoic habit. That's the only reason it has momentum and keeps happening. An old habit that says, I have to be more than I actually am because I'm not worthy of this. So I need constant confirmation of that. And that turns into human arrogance, which is just another form of fear. What if we were to just breathe and let go of that? What if some brilliant people thousands of years ago had it right? Breathe. Breathe. Just breathe. Keep breathing. But know how to breathe. Yeah, but I can get it quicker if I go take methamphetamine. Okay, great. How's that going to work out in the long run? Wow, we learned balance. And in the process, be Henry. Because Henry is differentiated, but not separate. That's the nature of this thing. If Henry stops being Henry, the whole universe is going to go out of whack. But I'm suggesting Henry is being more and more and more Henry and not more and more Bobo the Dancing Bear. Because I can see who Henry is. It's my job. And I'm lucky to be in the presence of it. It is a spiritual experience. That's why I'm the luckiest guy on earth.
And there's so much irony to this, where it's like, I'm losing you. It's like, no, you're actually gaining me. You know,
Yeah.
the masks are off.
Yeah.
The personas are on the fucking floor.
right.
You know, and there's no purification of spirit. There's
There you go.
a purification of Henry.
Yeah.
And it's much better. And in my opinion, it's like, holy shit, there's an 8-year-old boy in me. It feels as if, and this is a belief that I hold, maybe it's not necessarily, I actually think it's an incredibly constructive belief.
Mm-hmm.
I try and impress my 80-year-old self and my 80-year-old self simultaneously.
Good.
And my 8-year-old self is like, holy shit, yeah, you're giving it everything you got. You know, there is nothing that you're leaving on this bloody table.
Yep.
You are juicing the lemon. You are absolutely doing the best that you can. You're not just showing your best. You're actually being authentically your best self.
Yep.
That to me is energizing. That to me is spirit. You know, that to me is just this life force that animates me. You can feel it now. I can feel it now. You know, I'm
Measurably.
I'm speaking from the gut, the heart, the soul, whatever the fuck you want to call it.
You're speaking where you pointed, from your solar plexus, the seat of your power. It's coming out through your throat, your voice, the expression of your power. These wacky old people, they had something. The problem is the analogies. Because nobody could understand them, they called those centers chakras, wheels of energy. And then it got woo-woo from there. You're experiencing it. Hallelujah. Let's do our best to make it so anybody can experience this, because it's anybody's birthright. There's no exclusive control over this. It's not controllable.
Well, this is where I just want to absolutely tip my hat to you, because not only did you start this conversation by really pulling all of the fangs out of the word spirit for somebody that has been raised in a Western orthodoxy and has an aversion or might have a different interpretation of what that is.
Yes.
You started out this conversation incredibly practically. You broke down all of these things and then rebuilt them, and you made it so accessible, at least for me over the past 8 years, to have the spiritual experience, and hopefully to the people that are listening and watching this to be able to access that experience. It's like, that to me is, there's nothing more worthy of honor and respect and love in this world. And you've done it so bloody elegantly. You've done it impeccably. You know, I can't find fault in anything that you've said, nor would I want to, because the whole aspect of like not only getting therapy towards the end of this conversation, but like the whole ability for you to calibrate and control state throughout this whole conversation to then be able to present this information so that it makes it more approachable. So that again, I have more of an understanding, more of a love for what it is, this endeavor, this journey that we're really on.
Yes, good for you.
That to me is just, it makes you the coolest bloody guy in the world. So Mr. George, I can't thank you enough for another incredible conversation.
Well, right back at you.
You have a hell of a heart, a hell of a spirit, a hell of a mind, and I'm just so glad that now we can finally share this with the world at large so that other people can maybe come to that conclusion too.
Oh, that's awful sweet, but just to be clear, and I can't thank you for your kind words, just to be clear, this has little or nothing to do with me. The point of this thing is it has to do with you. It has to do with you. It has to do with everybody. It is your birthright. Anything I can do to help, I'm going to do. If it's not this way to find it, there's a way to find it. It's holotropic. That's what Zen is all about. You can focus all of your attention on anything. Eventually you're going to find this. I just don't want you to suffer any more than you have to. So that's all I'm doing. Okay? Thank you for a great topic and the courage to pursue it. And thank you for the courage and the patience to stick with it. Because I hope it's rewarding in the end.
So as always, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. Now, if you're looking to build a stillness practice yourself, we have a lot of free resources, audios that Jim's recorded, etc., and you can see those in our show notes below. Along with that, there are also online courses that you can roll in if you want to learn more from Jim. We also have Obsidian mind maps. You can see a couple of them popping up here on the screen. Now, these are really cool ways to look at the podcast information and really just get an overview of all of the podcast topics and deepen the information within yourself. And within them, there are more of Jim's recordings. There's also a lot of Jim's artwork. So if you're interested in any more still life stuff, you can find a bunch of links in the description below. Finally, I really hope that you're getting as much out of this as I have. This is why we started this whole thing in the first place, because the combination of Jim and the practice of stillness had really helped to transform our lives here at Still Life. We just wanted to make as much of that available to you. So hopefully you're getting a lot out of it, and please let us know if there's anything that you want to see more of in the future, or less of. Anyway, hope you have a lovely day. Bye-bye.